Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Everyday Mind. Tonight, the air outside carries that particular cold that settles into the back of your throat, clean and sharp, the way only northern evenings know how to be. Somewhere beyond the window, the last of the daylight has already folded itself away, and the trees at the edge of vision are nothing more now than dark shapes holding very still. The kind of stillness that isn't empty, the kind that's waiting. And if you happen to be reading this in a warm room, wrapped in something soft, well, the forest would like a word with you. Now, relax and enjoy, and let us begin our journey together. You are standing at the edge of something. Not the edge of danger, not the edge of a decision, simply the edge of a forest in the north of Sweden, in the last light of a late afternoon that has been grey and gentle all day. The ground beneath your boots is firm but yielding in the way that only old forest floor can be. 1,000 years of fallen needles pressed into something that is neither soil nor carpet, but something between the two. Something that remembers every footfall ever placed upon it and releases each one without complaint. The cold is real. You feel it first across the bridge of your nose, then along the tops of your ears. The kind of cold that doesn't threaten. It clarifies. It draws the edges of things a little sharper, makes the air feel like something you can almost hold. Each time you breathe out, a small cloud forms in front of you and drifts, unhurried, to the left, taken by a wind so faint you wouldn't have called it wind at all if you hadn't watched it. The trees ahead are tall, mostly pine, mostly dark, their trunks the color of old iron in the fading light. Lichen traces pale maps across their bark, silver green and unhurried, the work of decades that had nothing to prove. Below them the ground rolls forward and disappears between the trunks, and somewhere in that disappearance, something catches the last edge of your vision. You stop. A color that doesn't belong. Not quite blue, not quite green. Somewhere between the two, faint enough that you're not entirely certain you saw it at all. The kind of light that vanishes when you look directly and only reveals itself at the corner of things. You stand very still and let your eyes adjust. The forest around you settles into its evening register. The slow creak of a branch high overhead, the soft percussion of a pine cone dropping somewhere to your right, the distant, almost imagined sound of something metallic and thin, a note held briefly in the cold air and then released. A bell, perhaps, far away. You cannot be certain. The light comes again. This time you are ready for it. It rises from somewhere deep between the trees, blue pale and diffuse, not like torchlight, not like screen glow, more like the memory of moonlight filtered through water. It doesn't flicker. It breathes. A slow, even pulse that makes the surrounding darkness feel less like the absence of light and more like a room with its lamp turned very low. Your hand finds the bark of the nearest pine as you step forward. The texture is rough and cold and real beneath your palm. Bark, wood, solid and certain. You press your fingers lightly against it for just a moment, an anchor, a small hello to the ordinary world, and then you let go and take another step toward the light. The ground changes as you pass the first line of trees. The pine needles give way to something softer, something darker in color, and you realize with a quiet start that there is moss here, thick and continuous, covering the earth in a layer, so even it looks almost deliberate, as though someone, a very long time ago, had decided that this particular ground deserved something more careful than dirt. Your footsteps make almost no sound. The silence that rises up around you is not the silence of emptiness. It is the silence of a room where everyone has agreed, without saying anything, to be very still together. You breathe in. The air here carries something different. Pine is still there, still clean and resinous at the back of the throat, but underneath it now there is something else. Earthen and faintly cool, the way deep shade smells after a long rain. The smell of things that grow without needing sunlight, that are patient in ways that have no name. The light between the trees is stronger now. Not brighter exactly, more present, as though it has been here all along and is simply becoming less shy. The trees themselves are beginning to look different, the pines thinning, their shapes giving way to something taller and more slender. You see the first of them, perhaps 20 meters ahead, rising pale from the moss, like something that had not quite decided whether it was plant or pillar. Its form is unmistakable even in this low light. Bamboo. Here, in the north. Here, where it has no business being. And yet here it is, tall and clean and perfectly still, its surface the color of pale celadon jade, and somewhere deep inside the shaft of it, a light moves slowly upward, like a breath rising in a very quiet chest. You stand and watch it for a long moment. The cold is still on your face. Your boots are still on the ground. The pine at your back is still solid and ordinary and real. And yet something has shifted, gently and without announcement, in the quality of the air around you. A slight loosening, as though the world has exhaled, as though the muscles at the back of your neck have remembered just now that they are allowed to be soft. A second stalk of bamboo catches the low light beside the first, then a third, then too many to count, stretching away into the forest in long curved rows that suggest a path without committing to one. You are at the edge. The light is patient. There is no hurry here, no sound behind you worth returning to. The evening is settling in, blue and still, and the forest ahead is breathing in its own slow, illuminated way, and all you have to do, all that is asked of you, gently and without pressure, is to take one more step forward. So you do. The moss deepens as you move further in. You notice it first beneath the arches of your feet, a give that wasn't there before, a softness that makes each step feel like a small act of trust. The ground here is not unstable, it is simply generous. It receives the weight of you without resistance, the way a good bed receives a tired body, and you find that you are walking more slowly, not because you are being careful, but because slow is simply what this place asks for, and some part of you that is older and quieter than your thoughts has already agreed. The bamboo rises around you on all sides now. They are tall, taller than any bamboo you have seen in photographs or parks or the careful arrangements of botanical gardens. These reach up past the point where detail is possible, their upper sections dissolving into a canopy that is less ceiling than atmosphere, a layered, swaying country of leaf and shadow that moves in ways the air down here does not quite account for, as though the forest has its own circulation, its own slow inner weather, separate from the world outside. Each stalk is the color of deep water over pale stone, not uniformly. There are variations, shifts from blue-green to a warmer celadon at the nodes where the sections of each stalk meet, rings of slightly darker color that wrap the bamboo at intervals and give the whole column a segmented architectural quality, as though the forest were constructed rather than grown. but the light inside each stalk contradicts that impression entirely. Nothing constructed ever held light this way. Gently, imprecisely, as though the glow were a mood rather than a mechanism, as though the bamboo were not lit from within, but was simply, quietly, luminous by nature. You stop and stand beside one. Up close, the surface of the stalk is cool to the touch. You reach out without thinking, 2 fingers resting against the outer wall, and the temperature is the temperature of still water in early morning, the temperature of a stone that has been in shade all day. Not unpleasant, startlingly specific. Beneath your fingertips, the surface is smoother than you expected, with a faint, almost imperceptible texture that runs in vertical lines so fine they are more feeling than fact. The light inside moves, very slowly, a drift rather than a pulse now, rising from some indeterminate point below the soil line and traveling upward through the shaft with the unhurried certainty of a thought that knows where it is going. You watch it travel past your hand, past the height of your shoulder, up and up until it reaches the canopy and diffuses into the general blue-green glow above. You lower your hand. Something has changed in your chest. Not dramatically. This is not the breathless catch of surprise, not the quickening of anxiety. It is softer than either of those things. A settling, as though something that has been held at a slight angle for a very long time has been placed quietly and without ceremony, flat. You begin to walk again. The path, which was never a path, which is simply the space the trees have left between themselves, curves gently to the left, and you follow it without deciding to. The moss continues. In places, it rises over the roots of older trees that have been absorbed into the bamboo grove, the way the past is absorbed into any living place, present but unhurried, their forms still legible beneath the green, hummocked and quiet. You step over one such root and find yourself in a slightly wider space where the stalks are fewer and the light gathers more openly, pooling on the moss floor in soft irregular shapes that shift when the canopy moves. The cold is still with you. It has not lessened, but it has changed character. At the edge of the forest, the cold was the cold of exposed air, of open sky, of the world in the process of releasing the last warmth of the day. Here it is something more interior, the cold of deep shade, of water held underground, of spaces that have not been disturbed by direct sun for so long that they have developed their own quiet climate. It is not uncomfortable. It asks only that you remain still enough to be part of it, rather than a disturbance passing through. A sound reaches you from above. The bamboo stalks have begun, very softly, to speak to each other. It is not a creaking. Creaking implies protest, implies strain, implies something being asked to do more than it was designed for. This is lighter than that. The stalks are shifting by fractions, leaning the barest degree in a movement that propagates through the grove like a thought moving through a mind, and where they make contact, tip against tip, the outer wall of one against the shoulder of the next, the sound they produce is hollow and clear and brief, a note without melody and without duration, a sound that arrives and is already leaving as it arrives. You tilt your head back. Above you, the canopy has no sky in it, only gradations of green-blue light, layers of leaf and stalk receding into a luminous haze that the eye cannot resolve into anything solid. Looking up is like looking into very calm water from below, depth without content, luminosity without source, You stand like this for a moment that has no particular length, your face tilted toward the light, your shoulders lowered, your jaw soft. Somewhere far away, further than the bell you heard at the forest's edge, further than seemed possible from where you stood then, comes a single suspended note. Not the bell this time. Something smaller, more fragile. The sound a single thread of glass might make if glass could remember what it was before it was glass. The note holds for longer than physics should permit, then fades, not into silence, but into a frequency lower than hearing, a vibration you feel more in your sternum than your ears, and then even that is gone. The grove is very quiet now, not the quiet of things that have stopped, the quiet of things that have arrived somewhere. You walk on, and the light walks with you, and the cold is on your face like a clean cloth, and the moss beneath you gives and gives, and somewhere in the middle of all of this you notice, with the mild, untroubled surprise of someone finding a coin in an old coat, that you have stopped thinking about anything in particular. The bamboo thickens around a slight rise in the ground ahead of you. The glow there is deeper, not brighter, but more concentrated, the way a word becomes more itself when you say it slowly. You move toward it with the easy certainty of someone who has, without fanfare, arrived somewhere they were always going. There is no hurry. There never was. The rise in the ground is gentle enough that you do not notice you are climbing until you are already at the top of it. It is not a hill. It is more like a long, slow exhale of the earth beneath the moss, a swelling in the ground that lifts you imperceptibly a meter or two above the level of the grove floor, and from here the light reveals itself differently. You can see further between the stalks in every direction, and what you see is this. The bamboo does not glow uniformly. Each stalk holds its own particular brightness, its own rhythm, its own shade within the family of blue-green that the grove shares. Some pulse slowly, a long rise and fall, like the breathing of something very large and very calm. Others hold a steadier, cooler light, almost white at their centers, the way old stars appear white when you look at them long enough. And some, the ones at the very furthest edge of your vision, where the grove curves away into depth, carry barely any light at all, just a faint, residual luminosity, as though the glow is a memory the wood is still holding, softly, without quite being able to let it go. You have the feeling, standing here, that you are looking at something that is also looking back. Not with eyes, not with anything as direct as attention, more the way a landscape can hold the impression of everyone who has ever stood in it, a quality in the air, a weight in the stillness, the particular texture of a silence that has been inhabited for a very long time. There are stories in many parts of Asia about groves like this, not bamboo that glows, or not only that, but bamboo as a living record. In the old traditions of Japan's mountain communities, particularly those who made their homes along the edges of the deep cedar forests of the interior, bamboo was understood to be a kind of writing, not the writing of people, not the language of documents and histories and intentions, but the writing of the earth itself, a slow inscription of what the soil knew, what the water had carried through the roots over centuries, what the seasons had said to the rock beneath the ground. The Chinese character for bamboo is among the oldest in any written system, appearing on oracle bones and bronze vessels long before most of what we now call literature existed. It meant, in these early inscriptions, not just the plant, but the capacity of the plant, its ability to hold form under pressure, to bend without breaking, to remain itself through conditions that would alter almost anything else. You think of this not as information, but as texture. The way certain facts, when they reach you in the right place at the right time, become less like things you know and more like things you remember, as though the knowledge were already there, folded into something beneath the surface of you, and the telling of it is simply the moment of unfolding. The moss on the rise is drier here and finer. A short, dense growth the color of old sage, slightly silvered at its tips where the ambient light of the grove catches it. You crouch down without deciding to, and at this lower angle, the world rearranges itself. The bases of the bamboo stalks fill your field of vision, thick and cool and pale, rising from the ground with the quiet authority of things that have been standing here since before the question of standing was ever considered. At soil level, the light is different again. It doesn't come from above, from the canopy or the midsection of the stalks. It seems to originate from somewhere below the surface, seeping upward through the roots, threading itself through the moss in pale blue-green filaments that are too thin to follow directly, but that you can see, collectively, as a kind of luminous undertexture to the ground itself, as though the earth here were lit from its own interior, as though the light were not something the bamboo produced, but something the bamboo translated, a language spoken first underground, in the slow vocabulary of mineral and root and water moving through stone, and then carried upward into the visible world by the patient architecture of the grove. You stay crouched for a long moment. The cold is at your knees now, rising from the ground through the fabric of your clothing, specific and clean. And here, at this close distance, you notice something that the distance had obscured, a smell, very faint. The bamboo carries a scent that is almost not a scent, more a quality of the air immediately around the stalks, cool and faintly resinous, with a thin edge of bitterness beneath it, like green tea that has steeped a moment too long. It is not unpleasant. It is the smell of something that is very much alive and very much itself, without apology or modification. You breathe it in, hold it for a moment, release. Somewhere above you, the canopy stirs. The movement begins at a distance. You hear it before you feel it, a long traveling sound passing through the upper stalks from somewhere to the northwest. A collective soft percussion of leaf and hollow wood that moves through the grove, like a sentence being read, word by word, in a language that doesn't require understanding to be received. The sound reaches the stalks directly above you and passes through them, and for just a moment, the light inside those particular stalks brightens almost imperceptibly, a held breath of additional luminosity, a single slow pulse, and then the sound moves on, eastward, fading into the grove's general quiet in the way that music fades when you've moved far enough from its source that you can no longer tell whether you're still hearing it or only remembering it. You stand. Your knees straighten. Your eyes readjust to the middle distance. The grove continues in every direction with the same patient, luminous abundance, offering no single point of destination, no obvious path forward, simply the continued presence of itself, available, unhurried, indifferent in the best possible sense of the word. Then the wind chimes. You have heard them twice before. At the forest edge, a suggestion. Somewhere in the deepening silence, a residue. This time, they are present in a way that is neither of those things. 3 notes, or perhaps 4, arriving in close succession from a direction you cannot quite locate, the sound both close enough to be detailed. You can hear the slight metallic shimmer at the beginning of each note, the way it crystallizes before it blooms, and far enough away to carry the quality of something dreamed rather than heard. The notes do not form a melody. They are simply themselves, existing briefly and without intention. But they do something to the quality of the air around you. The silence that follows them is not the same silence that preceded them. It is fuller, rounder, a silence that has been given shape by the notes the way a room is given shape by the walls. It no longer needs to mention. You hold that silence. It holds you back. The grove breathes, all of it at once, all the stalks in their particular rhythms, the light drifting upward through each one, the moss receiving the cold, the canopy turning its 10,000 small faces toward a sky you cannot see, and you are standing in the middle of all of it, breathing in the faint, resinous cold air, your hands at your sides, your weight settled into the generous ground. Nothing is required of you here. Not navigation, not understanding, not the accumulation of detail or the construction of meaning or the effort of being anywhere other than precisely here, in this exact quality of light, with this exact cold on your face, and the bamboo arranged around you in its ancient and luminous patience. You take one step further into the grove, then another. The rise slopes down ahead of you, gently, and at its foot the bamboo grows closer together again, the stalks almost touching, their combined light forming a corridor, not narrow enough to feel enclosed, not wide enough to feel open, exactly wide enough to feel held. You follow it. The corridor of bamboo opens without warning. One moment the stalks are close on either side of you, their light overlapping, their combined glow turning the air between them into something almost tangible, a medium, a presence, a color you could cup in your hands if hands were the right instrument for it. And then the next step you take carries you out of that closeness and into something else entirely. Space. Real space. The kind that registers in the chest before the eyes have finished processing it. You stop walking. The clearing is not large, perhaps 20 meters across, perhaps a little more. It is difficult to judge with confidence because the bamboo at its edges does not form a clean boundary, but rather a gradual transition, the stalks growing further apart, their light spreading and softening as they recede until the grove becomes more suggestion than structure, and the clearing simply is, without quite beginning anywhere. The ground here is different again. The moss continues, but sparser now, and between its patches the earth is dark and fine, the kind of soil that has never been turned, that carries the compacted memory of every season that has passed over it. And at the center of the clearing, perfectly still, is water. A pool, small enough to cross in a dozen steps, but the way it holds the light makes it feel larger than its edges suggest. The surface is absolutely flat, not the flatness of calm water, which still carries the ghost of its own movement, the faint meniscus of potential, but something beyond calm, something that has arrived at a stillness so complete it has become another category of thing entirely, less liquid than mineral, less pool than mirror. You approach slowly. Your footsteps, which the moss had been softening all this time, are now nearly silent. The ground around the pool seems to absorb sound the way the water absorbs light, quietly and completely, without return. You reach the edge and look down. The reflection is perfect. The bamboo grove stands inverted in the water below you, its pale stalks descending into a depth that appears, impossibly, greater than the clearing above. The glow of the bamboo doubles, the real grove breathing above, its reflection breathing below, and between them the surface of the pool, thin as a held thought, maintaining the boundary between the two worlds with a precision that feels almost deliberate, almost tender. A leaf falls. You do not see it fall from the canopy. You only know it has fallen because it arrives. A single bamboo leaf, narrow and pale, drifting in a long unhurried arc from somewhere above the edge of your vision, descending with the slow certainty of something that has accepted gravity as a friend rather than a force. It touches the water. The rings that spread from that contact are so slow, so perfectly circular, so even in their expansion, that you stand and watch them travel all the way to the edge of the pool and disappear into the dark soil of the bank without diminishing once, as though the water were not disturbed, but simply recording something, a small event, a small note, a small fact added to a very long and very quiet account. You lower yourself to sit at the edge. The ground receives you without comment. The cold comes up through the moss and the earth beneath it, settling along the backs of your legs, specific and grounding. The cold of deep shade, of water close by, of a place that does not warm easily because it does not need to. You pull your knees loosely toward you. Your hands rest in your lap. Your shoulders drop slowly, by perhaps a centimeter, then another. There are places in the world, in the old understanding of many peoples, where water and light meet in exactly this way, and those places were considered thresholds, not dangerous ones, not the dramatic thresholds of myth, guarded by riddles and tests. The quieter kind, the kind where the ordinary world simply becomes, for a moment, translucent, where you can see through it to whatever is underneath, the way you can sometimes see through very still water to the texture of the stone below. In the mountain communities of Japan's interior, particularly along the river valleys of Gifu and Nagano, there existed a practice with no formal name, only a description, the act of sitting beside still water in the evening, not fishing, not bathing, not doing anything in particular, simply being present at the edge of the reflection. The understanding was not mystical exactly. It was practical in the way that old practical wisdom often is. The reflection showed you the world as it was arranged, but without the weight of it, without the urgency, the same trees, the same sky, the same light, but held in water, and therefore held lightly, and something in the act of seeing the world held lightly, even for a few minutes, was understood to do something useful to the interior of a person. To remind them, perhaps, that the world could be held that way, that they could too. You look at your own reflection in the pool. It is dim. The light is behind you, the bamboo's glow not quite reaching across the water's surface to illuminate your face, and what you see is more impression than detail, a shape, a presence, something sitting at the edge of a luminous world, looking in. You study it for a moment without recognition and without judgment, the way you might study a word in a language you are just beginning to learn, aware that there is meaning there, patient enough to let it arrive in its own time. The reflection shifts, not because you moved. A breath of air has passed across the water from the far side of the pool, too faint to feel on your skin, but enough to introduce the slightest movement into the surface, a barely perceptible undulation that travels the width of the pool and reaches you as nothing more than a change in the quality of the light. Your reflection disperses into soft light. and then the water stills again, and you are back, sitting at the edge, and the bamboo grove is standing in the water below its own feet, and the clearing is exactly as it was. You realize in this moment that you are warm, not the warmth of temperature. The air is still cool. The ground beneath you still carries the cold of depth and shade. Something else, an interior warmth, the kind that has nothing to do with climate, the kind that arrives quietly, without announcement, when a person has been in the right place long enough for something in them to simply ease. You sit with it. The pool holds its stillness. The bamboo holds its light. A single frog, invisible somewhere in the moss to your left, produces one brief note and then thinks better of a second. The wind chimes, those impossible sourceless wind chimes, offer the faintest ghost of a sound from somewhere above the canopy, barely enough to name, gone before you can be certain. You are not thinking about tomorrow. You are not thinking about this morning. You are not, in fact, thinking about very much at all. And this is not the blankness of avoidance or exhaustion, but something more like the quality of attention a person reaches when they have been fully present somewhere long enough that the effort of being fully present has dissolved, and what remains is simply presence itself, without the scaffolding. The water in the pool does not move. The light in the bamboo drifts upward, stalk by stalk, in its slow and private rhythms. The leaf that fell earlier is still at the center of the pool, motionless now, having arrived exactly where it was going. You stay. There is nowhere else to be. At some point, you cannot say exactly when, you stop looking at the pool. It happens the way most important transitions happen in quiet places, not as a decision, not as a turning away, but as a gentle redistribution of attention. The pool is still there, the reflection is still there, but your eyes have softened their focus, and the world has become less a collection of things to observe and more a quality of light to exist within. And somewhere in that softening, the boundary between looking and simply being has become difficult to locate. You rise slowly. Your legs straighten without urgency. The cold that had gathered along the backs of your thighs disperses into the air as you stand, and for a moment you are aware of your own warmth as a thing, as a small self-contained climate, moving through a larger and cooler one. You turn from the pool without ceremony. The clearing holds your departure the way it held your arrival, with the same unhurried neutrality, the same quality of not minding, the same open invitation to simply continue. The bamboo corridor receives you again, but you do not follow it far. Perhaps 30 steps beyond the clearing, the ground changes again, a gentle irregularity you feel before you see it, the moss thickening suddenly underfoot, the earth below it rising in a long, slow undulation that resolves as you move closer into the base of a tree. Not bamboo, something older, a pine or something close to pine, its trunk wider than the span of your arms, its bark deeply furrowed in vertical lines that catch the ambient blue-green light of the grove and hold it in narrow strips so that the whole surface of the trunk appears striated, layered, a geological cross-section of time made visible. At its base, the roots have lifted clear of the soil, arching outward in long curved forms before plunging back into the ground, and between two of the largest roots, arching up on either side to roughly the height of your shoulders, the space between them lined with the same dense fine moss you have been walking on all this time. There is a hollow, not a hole, not a cave, a hollow. The word is precise. The kind of space that is defined not by what surrounds it, but by what it offers. And what this one offers is simple and unmistakable. A place to sit. A place where the earth itself has arranged its architecture over however many decades it took for roots of this size to grow this way into something that resembles, without having intended to, without having been asked, a chair. You stand at its edge for a moment. Then you sit down. The roots are on either side of you. The moss beneath you is several centimeters deep and gives completely, not collapsing but receiving, the way the best surfaces receive weight, with a slight, even compression that distributes the pressure so gradually you stop being able to feel any single point of contact and begin instead to feel a general, distributed support, as though the ground has simply decided to include you. Your back finds the trunk. The bark is rough against your shoulders through your clothing, a texture that is not comfortable exactly, but that is real in a way that is better than comfortable. Specific, grounded, a surface that has a history you can feel without needing to know. You let your spine settle against it, vertebra by vertebra, a slow negotiation between the curve of your back and the slight irregularity of the bark, and when it is done, when you have found the arrangement that works, something releases in your lower back that you did not know was held. Your hands come to rest in your lap. You are not cold. You are not warm. You are, at this moment, exactly the temperature of stillness. The bamboo grove continues around you in all directions, its light moving through the air in its slow internal way, the stalks conducting their quiet conversations in the canopy far above. From here, sitting low against the root of the old tree, the bamboo appears different, taller, more numerous, the perspective from the ground emphasizing their height in a way that makes them feel less like plants and more like structures, pillars of some vast hall whose ceiling is the northern sky, filtered through 10,000 layers of living green. The light from the nearest stalks falls across your legs. It has no warmth. It is cool light, the light of deep water and northern latitudes, and things that glow without burning. But it has a quality that warmth sometimes has, a quality of attention, of contact, as though the light is not simply passing through the space your body occupies, but is registering it briefly as it passes. You close your eyes, not because there is nothing to see, because what there is to feel has become more than what there is to see. And your body, which has been patient and obliging all this time, is ready now to be the primary instrument. The cold. It is everywhere at the same level now. Face, hands, the air entering your lungs with each breath, a uniform, settled cold that has stopped being a sensation and become more like a condition, like weather, like the given temperature of this particular world. You breathe it in. It travels down. Something in the center of your chest, something that has been slightly contracted since before you arrived here, since before the forest, since the morning, since longer than that, releases, fraction by fraction, without drama. Sound. The bamboo shifting somewhere above you, the hollow knock of stalk against stalk, very far up, barely reaching you by the time it descends through all that air. It arrives as vibration more than sound, something you feel in the bones of your skull rather than the canal of your ear, a frequency that is below music and above silence. Then the creak of the old tree at your back, a single slow syllable, deep and unhurried, The sound a very large and very settled thing makes when it adjusts itself by a fraction in response to something, temperature, perhaps, or simply the accumulated weight of continuing to exist. You feel it travel through the bark and into your spine. The wind chimes, distant, further than before, or perhaps the same distance, and you are simply further in, further down, further under, further along whatever axis it is that this place operates on. The notes arrive one at a time, with long spaces between them that are not empty, but are filled with the afterimage of the previous note, the way a bell continues to exist as a frequency in the air long after the sound has technically ended. You do not count the notes. Counting would require a kind of attention that belongs to a different register than the one you are currently operating in. You let them come. You let them go. Your breathing has slowed. You are aware of this, not because you are monitoring it, but because the breath has become audible, not loud, but present, a soft and rhythmic sound that joins the other sounds of the grove without disturbing them. The exhale is longer than the inhale. This is not technique. This is simply what the body does when it has been given enough time and enough stillness to remember what it already knows. The roots on either side of you are solid. The moss beneath you is generous. The trunk at your back is ancient and certain, and entirely indifferent to your worries in the most comforting way possible. The indifference of something that has weathered 300 winters and intends to weather 300 more, and in whose presence the things that felt urgent this morning have the grace to become, briefly, the size they actually are. Smaller than you thought. Lighter. The grove breathes around you, and you breathe with it, and the light moves through the bamboo in its slow, continuous drift upward, and somewhere in the middle of an exhale, the boundary between where you end and where the forest begins becomes, for just a moment, unclear. Not frightening, not strange, simply true. You do not remember deciding to open your eyes. They are simply open. The grove is simply there. Nothing has changed in the quality of the light, or the arrangement of the trees, or the temperature of the air against your face. And yet something is different, in the way that a room feels different when you return to it after a long absence, even though every object is exactly where you left it. The difference is not in the room. The difference is in the quality of attention you are bringing to it, which has been altered, quietly and without your involvement, by whatever happened in the space between one breath and the next. You are still against the trunk. The roots are still on either side of you. The moss is still beneath you. All of this is exactly as it was. But the bamboo has changed. Not in form, not in position. The stalks are where they were, the same heights, the same spacing, the same pale celadon color in the places where the light within them catches the outer surface. What has changed is the light itself, not its intensity, its behavior. Earlier, the glow moved through each stalk in a single direction, upward, always upward, the slow drift of luminosity rising from root to canopy in one continuous, uninterrupted current, the way water moves through a very tall and very narrow vessel. But now, watching from the hollow of the roots, with your eyes newly open and your attention newly soft, you begin to notice that the pattern has shifted. The light no longer moves uniformly. Each stalk is doing something slightly different. A longer pulse here, a shorter one there. A stalk near the edge of your vision that seems to hold its light entirely still for several seconds before releasing it upward in a single slow wave. another directly to your left, moving in a rhythm so gradual it is almost geological, a tidal rather than a respiratory pace, each one breathing, each one on its own time. You watch this for a while without trying to understand it. Understanding is not what this moment is asking for. What it is asking for is simpler, and in some ways more difficult, only that you continue to look, without the impulse to resolve what you see into a pattern, without the habit of the mind that reaches for explanation, the way a hand reaches for a railing on an unfamiliar staircase. The bamboo does not need explaining. It only needs witnessing. And so you witness it, stalk by stalk, rhythm by rhythm, the grove conducting its own slow internal orchestra, not in unison, never in unison, but in something more interesting than unison, a harmony that has no composer, a coordination that arises not from instruction, but from the accumulated responsiveness of each individual element to everything around it, the way a flock of birds moves as one body through the air without any single bird deciding the shape. The air moves. You feel it before you hear it. A pressure change so subtle, it registers not as wind, but as the faintest alteration in the weight of the air against your skin, as though the atmosphere has drawn one long, slow breath inward. The bamboo responds, not all at once. From the far edge of the grove, perhaps 50 meters to the north, the stalks begin to shift, their tips describing tiny arcs in the upper air, their light brightening imperceptibly as the movement travels through them. The sound arrives a moment later, that same collective soft percussion you heard earlier, hollow and unhurried, the clatter of light against light, wood against wood, note against note, in a sequence that moves through the grove, the way a long, slow wave moves through deep water, arriving at you not as a single event, but as a duration, a passage of time with a texture to it. It moves through the stalks directly above you. You feel it in the bark at your back, the faintest transmitted tremor, as though the old tree is registering something, acknowledging something, adding its own low, barely audible frequency to the conversation. The grove above you brightens by a degree. The light in the nearest stalks surges once, a single slow pulse, then returns to its previous rhythm. And then, without transition, you are no longer watching this from outside it. You cannot say when the change occurred. There was no moment of crossing, no perceptible threshold. One moment the grove was something you were sitting within, observing, a landscape with yourself as the separate and witnessing figure at its center. And then, somewhere between one exhale and the next, somewhere in the passage of that wave of light and sound through the canopy above you, the distinction became difficult to maintain. Not impossible, not gone, difficult. The way the distinction between the pool's surface and its reflection had been difficult to locate in the low light. The way the boundary between the moss and the soil beneath it was technically present, but practically irrelevant to the foot that walked on both. You are breathing. The grove is breathing. These two facts, which have been running parallel all this time, have begun to occupy the same frequency. Your exhale goes out into the cold air and becomes part of the cold air, and the cold air moves between the bamboo stalks, and the bamboo stalks carry it upward in their slow luminous currents, and somewhere in the canopy it disperses into the general atmosphere of the grove, and the grove takes it in, and it comes back to you, changed and unchanged, cold and clean, carrying the faint resinous trace of bamboo and old moss and deep soil. You breathe out. The grove breathes in. This is not metaphor Or rather, it is metaphor that has worn thin enough to become something more like observation. The respiratory exchange between a human body and a living forest is a real and documented thing, a biological fact with no mystical requirement, and yet the experience of it, felt from the inside, from the hollow of an ancient root in the blue-green dark of a northern evening, is something that the biological fact only partially describes. What it feels like is company. The warmth returns, still interior, still sourceless, still the warmth of something in the chest that has put down a weight it had been carrying for long enough that the absence of the weight is itself the sensation. But it is larger now, more evenly distributed. It has moved from the chest outward, into the shoulders, along the insides of the arms, down through the hips and into the legs where they rest against the moss. Your hands, which have been resting in your lap, feel slightly warmer than the air around them. You look at them, dim in the blue light, familiar, still. You have the thought. It arrives quietly, without insistence, the way the good thoughts arrive, that your hands have worked very hard for a very long time, and that this particular moment, resting in a hollow between ancient roots, with the cold light of a glowing forest moving around them, is as good a moment as any for them to simply be hands, not instruments, not tools, not the things you use to carry, to type, to hold, to manage, to maintain. Just hands, resting. Above you, the canopy has settled into a new arrangement of its own breathing, the individual pulses of the stalks becoming longer, more widely spaced, the intervals between the brightenings growing until the grove exists in something closer to a sustained glow than a moving one. The light is very blue now, bluer than when you entered, or perhaps you are simply more capable of seeing it accurately, now that your eyes have had sufficient time to calibrate, to let go of whatever color temperature the world outside carried, and adjust to this one, this particular and specific blue-green that belongs only here, only now. It is the color of the inside of a held breath, of deep water at noon, of the sky in the minute before the first star becomes visible. A sound drifts down from somewhere in the upper canopy, not the wind chimes, not the knock of stalk on stalk. Something smaller, briefer. The sound a single drop of water makes when it falls from a great height onto a surface that receives it well. One note. Complete. Gone. The grove absorbs it. You absorb it. The boundary, already soft, softens further, and you let it. You do not chase the sensation, do not attempt to intensify it or hold it or understand its mechanism. You simply permit it, the way you permit sleep when sleep finally comes. Not by doing something, but by ceasing, gently and without grief, to resist. The roots hold you on either side. The trunk holds you from behind. The moss holds you below. The light moves through the bamboo in its slow and various rhythms, each stalk on its own time, each one breathing in the way that is natural to it. The whole grove, a vast and patient apparatus of presence, and you are inside it, and it is inside you, and the cold is on your face like a clean and quiet hand. You do not need to be anywhere else. You are not anywhere else. You are here, exactly here, in the blue light, in the cold, in the breathing, and here is enough. Here is, in this moment, everything. The grove continues, softly, without end. The light is still there. You know this because you can feel it. A faint, even presence on the skin of your face that is not temperature, but something closer to awareness. The way you can feel the proximity of a candle without being able to say exactly where the heat ends and the knowing of the heat begins. But your eyes have grown heavy, and the effort of keeping them focused on any particular thing has become an effort you are no longer interested in making. The bamboo, the roots, the moss, the clearing somewhere behind you, all of it continues. You do not need to watch it to know this. It will be there whether you are watching or not. So you stop watching. And what remains is sound, not silence. Sound is not the same as silence, and what fills this grove is not the absence of noise, but the presence of a very specific and layered collection of it, each element existing at its own volume, its own distance, its own texture, and all of them together composing something that the ear, given sufficient time and sufficient stillness, begins to hear not as separate things, but as a single continuous field. You begin to hear it that way now. The first layer is the bamboo. High up, very high, well above the middle section of the stalks, somewhere in the place where individual culms give way to the thinning, whispering architecture of the upper canopy. The stalks are in contact, not constantly, not predictably. At intervals that follow no rhythm you can anticipate, two stalks find each other in the cold air, and the sound they make is brief and hollow and very clean. A knock without aggression, a note without melody. The kind of sound that arrives and is already leaving as it arrives. The way certain moments are already memory while they are still happening. You hear one now, then a long interval, then two in close succession, from different points above you, overlapping slightly, their combined resonance lasting perhaps a second longer than either would have alone. Then nothing. Then one more, far to the north, so far that by the time it reaches you, it has become less a sound than a suggestion of one, a vibration at the boundary of perception, something the body registers before the mind has decided whether to call it hearing. The second layer is the air itself. The grove has a sound that is not quite wind and not quite silence. It is the aggregate sound of the air moving between many closely spaced vertical surfaces, the bamboo stalks channeling and redirecting whatever small currents pass through the grove, each one contributing a fractional whisper as the air finds its way through the narrow spaces between them, so that the whole grove produces a continuous, almost subliminal breath, not loud enough to name, present enough to feel. It is the sound of a very large space being very still. You breathe in. Your breath enters the sound and becomes part of it. This is not imagination. The air you are taking in has been moving through this grove, between these stalks, across this moss, for the minutes and hours and seasons it takes for a place like this to develop the particular acoustic character it has, and your lungs are now briefly part of that system, briefly part of the circulation, and the breath that leaves you will continue what you started, will move between the stalks and be moved by them, will carry the faint warmth of your interior into the cold air of the grove, and exchange it without ceremony for the cold. You exhale. A long time passes in which nothing happens and everything continues. This is the correct description. Nothing happens. No new event, no new sound, no new element introduced into the field of your awareness, and everything continues. The bamboo, the light behind your closed eyelids, the cold, the aggregate breath of the grove, the distant and sourceless percussion high above you, The difference between nothing happening and everything continuing is not a small difference. The third layer is the ground. You did not know until now that the ground had a sound, but sitting here with the bark at your back and the roots framing you and your weight fully given to the moss, you begin to hear it, or rather, to feel it in a register that is close enough to hearing that the distinction has stopped mattering. A low frequency, below the range of the bamboo, below the range of the wind, the frequency of root systems in cold soil, of water moving at great depth through channels in the rock, of the slow thermal exchange between the Earth's interior and its surface, a sound that has been here for much longer than the grove, for much longer than any living thing in it. It travels through the roots, into your spine. Your jaw releases. This happens without instruction, without intention. One moment it is slightly held, not clenched, not tense in any way you would have described as tension, but simply maintaining the habitual mild contraction that the jaw maintains through most of the waking hours, the low-grade readiness that the body keeps as a default setting in a world that might, at any moment, require a response. And then it releases, and the difference is subtle and total, and you feel it in your ears, which opens slightly in the way ears do when the jaw relaxes, and the sound of the grove becomes, for a moment, marginally clearer, as though a door has opened. The wind chimes come for the third time. They are different now. Not in their sound. The same thin metallic shimmer at the beginning of each note, the same bloom into a frequency that is slightly too pure to be entirely physical, but in their relationship to you. Before, they were something you heard, something that arrived from outside and registered in your awareness as an event, a data point, a small fact about the world you were moving through. Now they are something else. They are a sound that you are inside of, the way you are inside the grove's aggregate breath, the way you are inside the low frequency of the ground. 3 notes, or 4. You have stopped counting. They arrive with long spaces between them, spaces that are, as before, not empty, but inhabited by the resonance of the preceding note, the frequency of it lingering in the air and in the bones of your skull, and in the moss beneath you, and in the cold itself, which seems to hold sound differently than warm air does, to preserve it longer, to carry it further. The last note takes a very long time to finish. You do not wait for it to finish, you go with it. What you are aware of now is simple. The weight of your own body, distributed evenly and without discomfort across the moss and the roots and the bark. This is present. The cold air entering through your nose, cooler than the air that leaves. This is present. The sound of the bamboo, high above, one stalk finding another in the dark. This is present. Nothing else is required to be present. The list of things that were present this morning, the screen, the inbox, the accumulation of small unfinished things that trail behind a person through their days like paper caught on a fence. These things exist. You are not pretending otherwise. They will be there, most of them, when you return. The world does not empty itself on your behalf. But here, now, they have no frequency. They are transmitting on a channel the grove does not receive. Your shoulders. You notice them now because they have done something you could not have asked them to do. They have dropped, fully and finally, to where they actually belong, which is lower than you generally carry them, lower than the day requires, lower than the posture of a person who is monitoring, managing, anticipating. They have arrived at the position of a person who is simply alive, simply breathing, simply here. It is a very specific relief, the kind that makes the former tension newly visible by its absence, the way you only notice how loud a room was when it finally goes quiet. A single sound, very close. Not the bamboo, not the chimes. Something smaller. The sound a creature makes when it moves through moss without meaning to be heard. A tiny displacement of air and fiber, gone almost instantly. A mouse, perhaps. A small bird settling somewhere in the roots to your right. Something alive and small and entirely unconcerned with your presence, going about the ordinary business of being itself in the dark. You feel, unreasonably and completely, a small warmth in your chest, not because of what it is, because of what it means to share a space with something that has no need to perform, no awareness of being witnessed, no relationship to you whatsoever, and yet is here, in the same grove, in the same cold, breathing the same air, simply and sufficiently itself. You are simply and sufficiently yourself, not more, not less. The bamboo breathes. The ground hums beneath the threshold of hearing. The cold air moves between the stalks in its quiet, aggregate way, and somewhere above the canopy, the sky is doing whatever the sky does in the north in the evening, in a place where there are no other lights. You do not need to see it. You are already inside it. The sounds continue. You continue. There is no difference, just now, between these two facts. You are still in the hollow, or the hollow is still around you. At this depth of stillness, the distinction has become genuinely uncertain, and you find that you have no interest in resolving it. Some time has passed. How much is not available to you, and this is not a problem. Time in this grove does not move the way it moves in the world of screens and schedules and the small tyrannies of the clock. It moves the way the light moves through the bamboo, upward, continuous, without urgency, arriving somewhere eventually, without having appeared to travel. You were in one moment, and now you are in another, and between them was something you could not account for, even if you tried, and you are not trying. The light has changed. This is the first thing you notice, not with alarm, not with the sharpened attention of someone registering a change that requires a response, but with the mild, accepting awareness of someone watching weather shift through a window from a warm room. The blue-green that has accompanied you since the edge of the forest, that particular, specific color that belongs to this grove and nowhere else, the color of deep water and northern shade, and the inside of a held breath, has begun very gradually to soften, not to fade. Soften. The distinction matters. Fading implies diminishment, a loss of intensity, a color retreating toward absence. This is something else. The blue is becoming less specific. It is widening, the way a note widens when a string continues to vibrate after the initial strike, and the higher frequencies fall away, and what remains is something lower, more fundamental, more simply itself. The color is releasing its particularity and arriving at something that is not quite color at all, but is not the absence of it either. Pale, luminous, a white that still remembers being blue. The bamboo holds it differently now. The stalks are still present. You can feel the ones nearest you, the cool radiance of them reaching your skin from 2 or 3 meters away in the same way the cold does, as a subtle, distributed presence rather than a point of contact. But the detail of them has softened. The segmented architecture, the variation in shade between node and internode, the individual rhythms of each stalk's interior light, these have become harder to locate. What you perceive now is less a collection of individual stalks and more a quality of the air, light without source, glow without object. You breathe. The air still carries the faint resinous bitterness of the bamboo, that clean, almost green trace that has been with you since you crouched at the level of the roots an hour ago, or longer. But it is thinner now, as though the air itself is becoming less dense, less specific, less insistent on announcing its own composition. It is simply air, breathable, cold, present. Your lungs take it, return it. The roots on either side of you are still solid. You are aware of this the way you are aware of the chair beneath you when you are almost asleep, not attending to it, not requiring it to be anything other than what it is, but knowing it is there, knowing it will continue to be there. The solidity of it available to you in the background, the way the ground is always available, the way certain things are always there, even when you have stopped thinking about them. The moss beneath you, the trunk behind you. These things continue. A sound reaches you, or rather the ghost of a sound, something so attenuated by distance and by the softening of your own perception that you receive it less as an event and more as a memory of one. The wind chimes. You know this not because you can identify the precise tonal quality that distinguishes them, but because something in you that does not require evidence recognizes them. The same notes, in the same impossible, sourceless arrangement, at the same frequency that lands in the sternum rather than the ear, further away than they have ever been, or you are further in than you have ever been. You let the distinction go, and when you let it go, something else goes with it, a last fine tension you had not known was present, located somewhere behind the eyes, the low-grade vigilance of a person who is always, even in rest, maintaining a small and private watch. It does not release dramatically. It dissolves. Like the color of the bamboo, it releases its particularity, becomes less specific, and in becoming less specific, becomes less. Your face is still. Your hands are still. The cold is on your cheeks and on the backs of your hands and in the air that moves, barely, between the nearest stalks, and it is not unpleasant, and it is not pleasant. It simply is. The temperature of here, the temperature of this. The bamboo far above shifts once. A single brief contact between two stalks somewhere in the high canopy. That clean, hollow knock that you have been hearing all evening, that you will perhaps always associate now in some wordless register of memory with the quality of light in this particular grove at this particular hour. It arrives, resonates briefly in the cold air, and leaves. The silence after it is very large. You are not in Sweden anymore. This thought arrives without drama and without question. Not that you have moved. You have not moved. The roots are still on either side of you. The moss is still beneath you. The old trunk is still at your back. But the frame that surrounded all of this, the mental coordinate that said northern Sweden, late afternoon, forest outside a town whose name you knew this morning, has grown so thin as to be transparent, and through its transparency, the place you are actually in has become, for the first time, fully visible. It has no name. It does not need one. It is simply the place that exists at the far end of sufficient stillness, the place that is always here, in every forest, beneath every ordinary geography, accessible not by travelling to it, but by remaining in one place long enough for everything else to become what it is, which is optional. The light is very pale now. White-blue. White. Something between white and the memory of white, spread evenly through the air without a specific source, emanating from the general atmosphere of the grove, the way the warmth of a room emanates from the walls after the fire has been low for a long time. Not from anywhere, from everywhere, ambient and complete. You cannot see the individual stalks anymore, or rather, you can see them if you attend carefully, if you bring the particular quality of focus required to separate figure from ground in low light, but attending carefully is not available to you right now, and this is not a loss. You are receiving the grove as a whole rather than as a collection of parts, and the whole is more than the parts were separately, the way music is more than the individual frequencies that compose it, the way sleep is more than the closing of eyes. Your body is very heavy. This is the word for it, and it is not quite the right word. Heavy implies effort, implies the body working against something, implies a direction. This is not that. This is the weight of a body that has given up effort, that has transferred the work of holding itself to the ground and the roots and the moss, and released the remaining tension into the cold air. You are held. That is the better word. You are held by the hollow, by the grove, by the accumulated patience of everything around you that has been here longer than you have and will be here after you have gone, and that holds you now not out of obligation, but simply because holding is what a place does when you have been in it long enough to stop being a visitor. You're breathing. You can hear it. Each inhale arrives, and the chest rises by a degree, and the cold travels down, and then the exhale, longer, warmer, softer, the chest settling, the body releasing, and then the pause, the small suspension at the very bottom of the breath, the moment between exhale and the next inhale where nothing is moving, where the body is simply itself, without the motion of breath, held in a stillness that is voluntary and complete and contains in its few seconds something that the word rest does not quite reach. You stay in that pause a moment longer than usual. The grove holds it with you. Somewhere very far above, the canopy is still moving. The slow, almost geological shift of tall bamboo in night air. The occasional soft percussion of stalk on stalk, traveling downward through all that distance until it reaches you as something barely louder than your own pulse. The ground beneath you hums at a frequency below language. The cold air moves between the stalks in its quiet, continuous way. And the light, the pale, sourceless, patient light that is no longer blue and not yet gone, spreads itself evenly through everything, through the air and the stalks and the moss and the cold, through the space between your fingers and the space between your thoughts. An illumination that is not looking for anything in particular to illuminate, that is simply present, the way certain kinds of love are simply present, not performing, not requiring a response, available without condition. You are inside it. You have always been inside it. The grove breathes. Once. Then again. The light is almost gone now. Not gone. Almost. There is still something in the air, a luminosity that has no specific location, that lives in the general atmosphere of the grove, the way certain memories live in a person, not in any one place, not attached to any one object or image, but present in the quality of everything, a tint in the atmosphere of the interior, available whenever you are still enough to receive it. You are that still. You are not sure if your eyes are open. You consider this question briefly and without urgency, and find that it does not resolve itself, and find further that the resolution of it is not required. What you are perceiving, the pale, even sourceless glow, the bamboo as presence rather than form, the cold as condition rather than sensation, is available whether your eyes are open or closed. The grove has stopped being something you look at and becomes something you are inside of. And being inside of something does not require the same faculties as looking at it. Your eyelids rest. The roots on either side of you, still there. You feel them at the outer edges of your awareness, the way you feel the perimeter of a room when you are deep in sleep, not attending to the walls, not thinking about the walls, but knowing they are there, knowing the space is bounded, knowing you are contained within something that has dimensions and permanence and will not alter while you are in it. This knowledge asks nothing of you. It is simply the background against which everything else rests. A sound. High above, very high, at the level of the canopy where the bamboo thins into its uppermost sections, where the cold night air moves with slightly more authority than it does down here among the roots. Two stalks finding each other. That clean, brief, hollow knock. It comes down to you through all that air. By the time it arrives, it is barely sound. It is the idea of sound, the memory of it, arriving a moment after the thing itself. You receive it. Then it is gone, and the silence that follows is larger than the silence that preceded it, which was already very large. This is the nature of sound in a place this still. Each sound, in passing, leaves the silence slightly more itself, slightly more fully present, as though the sounds are not interruptions of the silence, but are the silence's way of demonstrating its own depth. The way a stone dropped into still water does not disturb the water so much as reveal how still it was. The silence after the bamboo's note is very deep. You are at the bottom of it. Your breath, in, out. The pause. In. This is all. This is, right now, the full extent of what is happening. The slow, automatic, generous work of your own body, continuing without your instruction, without your oversight, without your involvement of any kind. The breath moving in and out of you is not something you are doing. It is something that is happening, and you are the place it is happening in, and this is an entirely sufficient arrangement. The ground beneath you hums. Below the moss, below the root system of the old tree, below the soil and the compacted centuries of fallen needles, and the slow accumulation of what the forest has released and reabsorbed over its long life. Somewhere below all of that, water is moving through stone. You cannot hear it. You feel it the way you feel the low frequency of a very large and very distant thing, the way sailors are said to feel the depth of the ocean beneath them through the hull of the ship, without being able to point to the sensation and name it. A knowledge that lives in the body, below the threshold of language. The wind chimes come one final time. You knew they would. Not because you predicted them, not because you have been waiting. Waiting requires a forward-leaning quality of attention that has not been available to you for some time now. You knew the way you know, in the last moments before sleep, that sleep is arriving. Not a thought about it, simply a knowledge that is part of the arriving itself. They are very far away, further than they have ever been, further than seems possible from within the grove, as though the sound were coming from a direction that is not north or south or east or west, but is instead inward, as though the chimes were not suspended somewhere among the bamboo, but were located in the same interior country, that the warmth in your chest has been coming from all evening. 3 notes. Long spaces between them. The 3rd note does not end. It continues past the point where sound is possible, continues in the bone and in the sternum and in the long muscles along either side of your spine, continues as vibration, as frequency, as something that has moved below the register of the ear and into the register of the body entire, and then even that thins, and then even that. What remains is not silence. Silence is an absence. The word implies that something was present and has left, that the space carries the shape of what is no longer in it. What remains here is not that. What remains is something that was always here, underneath the sounds, between the sounds, the medium through which the sounds travelled and into which they returned, the grove's original condition, the condition of a place that has been undisturbed for long enough that it has arrived at its own nature all the way down. It is warm. This surprises you mildly. Not the warmth. You have been feeling the interior warmth all evening, the sourceless warmth that has nothing to do with temperature. What surprises you is that you notice it now, here, at the furthest depth of the stillness, more distinctly than you have at any point before. As though the quieter everything becomes, the more clearly the warmth is audible, as though it were always this present, and the business of the world was simply loud enough to make it hard to find. You find it easily now. The light. There is still a light. One stalk, somewhere to your left. You do not turn toward it. Do not shift your position to see it more directly. Only receive it at the periphery, the place where perception is softest and most open. One stalk, holding its glow. Not pulsing now, not drifting. Simply present, the light steady and interior and very pale, more white than blue. The last specific point of luminosity in an atmosphere that has otherwise become uniformly, quietly dark. You do not watch it. You are aware of it. There is a difference. It does not diminish. It does not grow. It holds, with the quiet persistence of things that have decided to remain, not stubbornly, not effortfully, but with the natural continuance of a small fire that has found a good arrangement of its fuel and settled into the long, even burn that will outlast the evening without drama. It is simply there, at the left edge of your awareness, a small constant, a companion. Your hands. You are aware of them again, resting in your lap, exactly as they were. They have not moved. The cold air is still around them, but they feel different now than they did when you last attended to them, in the way that a familiar room feels different when you return to it after a long time away, every object in its place, and yet the quality of the space altered by the fact of your having been elsewhere and returned. Your hands have been resting while you were somewhere else, and now you are back in them, briefly, gently. The moss beneath them, still soft, still receiving. The old trunk behind you, still solid, still its 300 years of winters, its long indifference, its enormous and impersonal reliability. The roots, still framing you, still on either side, still holding. You do not think about tomorrow, not because tomorrow has been solved or dissolved or made harmless. It will arrive in its own time with its own contents, the inbox and the light through the window, and the accumulated small requirements of a life being lived. This is not a place that removes those things. It is a place that holds them for a while, at a distance that allows you to remember that they are not you, that you are the one they happen to, not the sum of them, that the you underneath all of it is something much quieter and much more durable. The single stalk to your left continues its steady light. You breathe. In. Out. The ground hums. Somewhere, impossibly far above, the canopy turns in the night air. All those thousands of narrow leaves, each one receiving the cold, each one part of the same enormous patient structure that has been growing toward the sky for longer than anyone currently living has been alive. The bamboo does not sleep. It continues in the dark, the same work it does in the light, drawing water upward through its tissue, exchanging gases with the atmosphere, growing by fractions of millimeters that are invisible in any single moment but amount, over the years, to the height of a tree. It continues. You continue. These are not different. The warmth in your chest is very steady now, very even. It has no edges. The light to your left holds. You are aware of it the way you are aware, in the lightest sleep, of a lamp left on in another room, not seeing it, not needing to see it, but knowing it is there, and the knowledge of it being there, being enough, being in fact a kind of company, a presence that asks nothing of you and offers simply the fact of its own continuing. You let your awareness of it soften. Not to let it go, to let it be there without you holding on to it, the way you let a breath go without ending the breathing. The light continues, whether you hold it in awareness or not. The grove continues. The cold continues. The moss continues receiving the weight of you without comment, without tiring, without asking when you mean to leave. You have nowhere to be. This is not a temporary condition. It is not the absence of the places you usually have to be. Those places exist, and you will return to them, and they will make their usual requirements in their usual ways. But here, now, in this hollow, at this depth of this particular evening, the having nowhere to be is not a gap in the schedule. It is a fact about the present moment that is simply and entirely true. You are here. This is where you are. Nothing further is required of the sentence. The bamboo, the cold, your breath, the light, pale, steady, small, still there. Still there. The grove holds you, and you hold the grove, and between these two holdings, the night deepens quietly, and the cold settles, and the moss receives, and the roots frame, and the ground hums its low, deep, patient note beneath everything, beneath the bamboo and the history of bamboo, and the people who understood bamboo, and the people who will understand it long after, beneath the cold and the light and the breath, beneath even the silence, which is very deep now, which is, at this depth, not empty, but full, full of everything the evening has moved through to arrive here, full of the cold and the glow and the pool, and the leaf and the chimes, and the small creature in the moss, and the note that took too long to end, and the warmth that arrived without announcement and stayed. All of it here, all of it yours. Rest now.